Well, good Friday evening. Thank you for joining us here on the last weekend of summer. It's the unofficial end of summer here as we go into Labor Day weekend. I'm 13 News Now meteorologist Evan Stewart, based here at WVEC in Norfolk, Virginia. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, or maybe you found us last week because of Tropical Storm and Hurricane Erin, that of course had big impacts here across the East Coast. Hurricane Hub Live is a special that we do every night at 8 o'clock. We talk about what's going on in the tropics, if there's something going on. And right now, fortunately, there's not much going on. And really this week, we've been taking a look back at Hurricane Katrina. Of course, today, the 20th anniversary of Katrina making landfall along the Gulf Coast in Louisiana, doing all kinds of destruction through parts of New Orleans and down towards Gulfport, Mississippi. And we'll have a lot more on Hurricane Katrina coming up, because our sister station, WWL, located right in the French Quarter, they were front and center for a lot of what went on with Hurricane Katrina, again, 20 years ago today. So on our headlines tonight, here are the topics on Hurricane Hub Live. We're talking about a tropical Atlantic that remains quiet, and it will through the weekend. There's one area that we're watching some potential development as we head into early next week with some of these tropical waves that are coming off the coast of Africa. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have a lot more on Hurricane Katrina. So let's get right to it. Talk about what's going on out there right now. And again, there's not much going on. This whole hurricane season so far has really been concentrated on one storm. That was Hurricane Erin, became a Category 5 hurricane, as you remember. All the other storms, all the other 5 have been tropical storms. So we've only had one hurricane this year, and it was a monster, Hurricane Erin. Fortunately, Hurricane Erin didn't make landfall, and it's one of the very few times that a hurricane that got up to Category 5 strength didn't at least at some point have some kind of more significant impact and make a landfall somewhere in the United States or through the Caribbean or down through Central America. So we're thankful for that. Of course, it did cause some problems along the outer banks of North Carolina with some of that overwash along Highway 12. The remnants of Fernand moving off into the North Atlantic. Of course, yesterday it was downgraded to just a regular old area of low pressure. And again, not a lot going on there. Some thunderstorms down here in the Eastern Caribbean, not really expected to develop into much at all. But we are watching for some potential development in the next week down here around the Cabo Verde Islands. Now, we're not expecting anything over the weekend. That's the good news. And it's these tropical waves that develop, these areas of low pressure that develop in the tropical waves. They develop across the African continent, move off the continent down here into the Atlantic Ocean. And of course, down here at these latitudes, the winds do blow from east to west. Our weather, as we get into the mid-latitudes, here through much of the United States, moves from west to east. But again, we've got these latitudes down here where the weather generally moves from east to west. And as these waves roll off the coast of Africa, some of them, if they have enough energy and the conditions are right here in the Atlantic, they could develop into something tropical. And there are a couple of waves out there that we're watching that do have the potential as we head into the day on Sunday to move off the coast of Africa and eventually potentially develop into something here around the Cabo Verde Islands. Right now, the Hurricane Center is saying it's about 30% chance over the next 7 days. Nothing over the next 2, because those waves will be over the coast of Africa, over the land. And once they move off the coast, that's when we have that potential development again here around the Cabo Verde Islands. Some of the long-range computer models, some of them have it doing a little something right now. Nothing too significant, and it's really one of those situations where we have to wait for the wave to move off the coast for the computer models to really have a better idea of what's going to happen. We see if they start to develop, start to see a little bit of spin. If we just see a flare-up of thunderstorms that really aren't organized, the computers will get a better idea of what's going on once these waves move off the coast of Africa. So there is a chance that we could see something as we head into the middle part of next week. And as a matter of fact, the Climate Prediction Center, they put out a 2-week and a 3-week forecast for tropical development. And they have a low end that's a less than 20% chance, a moderate and a high chance of tropical development. And right now, this takes us September 3rd through the 9th, so next Wednesday into the following Tuesday. You can see that there is that low chance of development here. Same sort of area that the Hurricane Center was watching as well, which you would expect that. Down here through the intertropical convergence zone. This is also really the main development region, especially as we get here into late August and early September, that we look for that potential for development. So that's next Wednesday through the following, so a little more than a week out. Then we go to the 2-week forecast, so September 10th through the 15th. And you'll notice that we have a more of a moderate chance because some of the long-range computer models are hinting that the environmental conditions will be a little more conducive to that kind of development. Some of these long-range computer models that we have now go out 15 days. Some even go out 30. Of course, the farther out you go, there's greater margin of error, greater uncertainty because things change. Just a little change in the beginning can make a big change the farther out you go. So that's why it's sort of broad brushed in here, low to moderate chances. That's, again, as we go through the middle of September, which you would expect because our climatological average peak of hurricane season in the Atlantic is September 10th. So we are getting right towards the prime time for that development. And it sort of is slower to ramp up as we lead into September. And then it really, is slow to wind down. So we typically do see a lot of activity in September and even into October. Early part of hurricane season usually quiet. Once we get past that peak, about 65, 70% or so of the tropical activity occurs after that climatological peak. So again, a long way to go through this. Atlantic hurricane season runs all the way through the end of November, but we are now halfway through the season, at least as far as the months go, as we get closer to that peak. As we move over here towards the Gulf, the Bay of Campeche, the Western Caribbean, again, low-end chances of development. One area that has been very active so far this year has been the Pacific Ocean. And we have two areas that we're watching. And so when we have these actual X's on there, those are actual areas of low pressure, tropical waves, that are out there. One here has about a 70% chance of development over the next 7 days, and this system has about a 70% chance of development over the next 7 days. And the Pacific has been very active this year. As a matter of fact, we've already got all the way through Juliet tropical storm, our next named storm. And we have two of them that have the potential for development. That's Kiko, and then we have Lorena. So there's that potential for two more tropical systems in the Pacific Ocean. And if you've been hearing a lot about the Pacific, it's really because the Atlantic has been quiet, other than air and all the other tropical storms. And that's what they've been. They haven't even made hurricane strength. They've been fairly short-lived, one only a couple of days. So there's been a lot of activity in the Eastern Pacific. And it looks like things are going to remain active in the Eastern Pacific here over the next week, quiet in the Atlantic. Now, of course, it wasn't quiet in the Atlantic 20 years ago today. This is the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina making landfall. And when we come back after this short break, we'll have some stories coming in out of Louisiana from some of our sister stations down there where they talk about, what happened and how things are recovering here 20 years later. We'll have that right after this break.
We remember all of those who endured this tragedy along with us. We remember them with our compassion. We remember them with our empathy. We remember them with our sorrow and our remorse.
New Orleans is still here. New Orleans still stands, and New Orleans is truly positioned, not only as we have evolved, but we're empowered for the next 20 years.
Welcome back to Hurricane Hub Live. You were just listening to a heartfelt message from former WDSU anchor Norman Robinson and the New Orleans mayor, LaToya Cantrell, talking about the 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. This memorial wreath-laying ceremony happens annually in New Orleans. And Katrina caused major death and destruction to coastal areas of the Gulf of Mexico and a few other southern cities. Let's toss it over to meteorologist Hunter Forrest with some of the facts from this historic disaster.
In late August 2005, Hurricane Katrina became one of the deadliest and most devastating natural disasters in U.S. history. Forming over the Bahamas as a tropical depression on August 23rd, the storm trekked west, making its first landfall near Miami, Florida, just 2 days later as a Category 1 storm, with winds of 85 miles per hour. Katrina then emerged back into the Gulf, where it exploded into a Category 5 storm on August 28th, with winds of 175 miles per hour. One day later, Katrina makes a second landfall on the Louisiana coast as a Category 3 storm with winds of 125 miles per hour. The storm brought massive storm surge, breaching levees and flooding 80% of New Orleans, leaving entire neighborhoods submerged. There was a recorded storm surge up to 14 feet in portions of Alabama and well over 20 feet along the Mississippi-Alabama border. Over 1,800 people lost their lives and millions were displaced, becoming one of the top 5 deadliest hurricanes on record. Property damage exceeded over $100 billion, making it the costliest hurricane in U.S. history. For 13 News Now, I'm meteorologist Hunter Forst.
Thanks, Hunter. Now, New Orleans suffered catastrophic flooding when levees and canals failed, submerging approximately 80% of the city. Paul Murphy from our sister station in Louisiana takes us back 20 years ago today with testimony from residents and disaster response from the National Guard.
We've got a flash flood warning for New Orleans. A levee breach has occurred along the Industrial Canal at Tennessee Street.
Floodwaters surged into the lower Ninth Ward, destroying houses and rushing across the parish line.
Floodwaters from Hurricane Katrina surged rapidly through New Orleans' lower Ninth Ward in the early morning hours of August 29, 2005, giving residents little time to escape.
Basically, we had 5 minutes to get from inside the house, 5 minutes to get onto the attic, 5 minutes onto the roof, and then now we're floating up the street.
And just like that, Robert Green's life changed in an instant. His Tennessee Street home lifted off its foundation just as 7 family members, including 3 granddaughters, made it to the roof.
I put Shanae on the roof, turned my back to get Shania and Muffin. Shanae fell off the roof and was gone. 25 feet of water, raging winds, dark as hell, nothing but dirty black water out there.
Green's 3-year-old granddaughter, Shanae, died in the floodwaters. His 74-year-old mother, Joyce, who suffered from advanced Parkinson's disease, also passed away after falling into the water and nearly drowning.
My brother resuscitated her, and she survived Katrina's hurricane winds, all the debris following it, and at the end of the hurricane, about 7 hours later, she lay dead on the roof with her eyes open and a leaf in her mouth.
Green said neighbors helped neighbors survive in the hours after the levees broke, swamping his community. His family was eventually rescued by neighbor Ernest Shorty Edwards, who took them by boat to the Claiborne Avenue Bridge to wait for help.
If it wouldn't been for Shorty, if it wouldn't have been for Michael Knight, if it wouldn't have been for Antonio God, if it wouldn't have been for Stephen Ford, a lot of people would have been gone.
Meanwhile, on the river side of the lower Nine, National Guard troops activated 3 days before Katrina rode out the storm at Jackson Barracks.
Katrina hit on August 29th, which was a Sunday, and then on Monday morning, the waters rose 7 feet in an hour and a half. So we knew we had to evacuate, so we evacuated to the Superdome, and that became the base of operations.
Colonel Jacques Thibodeau was one of the commanders who led the charge. His task force of about 1,000 guardsmen was the first military unit to respond to Katrina. Thibodeau admits he was overcome with emotion as he flew from Jackson Barracks to the Superdome.
I could see people as far as I could see on rooftops. Immediately the day after the storm, and I had great appreciation that I was alive. And in that 5-minute flight, I felt sadness at how many people we would not be able to get to. And then right before I landed at the Superdome, I replaced that with determination that we were going to save as many as we could.
The Guard worked around the clock, plucking families off rooftops and out of waterlogged neighborhoods. They evacuated the Superdome. turned to an even greater crisis, the New Orleans Convention Center. Thousands huddled there without food, water, or electricity. Some died waiting for help. Reports of crime, violence, and lawlessness added to the chaos.
We were going in with 1,000 soldiers from 5 states to secure the convention center. That's the kind of thing, it takes months to plan something like that. And we were given the word at 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday, 5 days after the storm, and we went in, we didn't fire a shot. We secured the place in 30 minutes. We started feeding everyone in 3 hours, and we started evacuation at 19 hours. And at 30 hours after we got there, it was empty.
Thibodeau said the apocalyptic nature of Katrina was devastating.
What haunts me the most is the 1,300 people we could not get to. We saved 69,000 people, and I still think about them every day.
Rescuing the living was only the beginning. It took more than 40 days to drain the city. As the floodwaters slowly retreated, soldiers and emergency responders went door to door looking for bodies.
We began to pick up the pieces, to get the DMOR teams and to pick all those remains up, as many as we could find, and we still couldn't find all of them. And that went on for probably about 4 months.
Katrina crosses marked the homes and buildings that were searched.
We created the Katrina X, as they call it, where you have a date, the agency that searched it, if there were any fatalities, and initials of the person that searched it. And it gave us a grid to look at. It just came out of necessity when you're talking about all the structures that you had to check emerged.
All 50 states eventually sent National Guard troops to help in the recovery effort. Louisiana's 256th Infantry Brigade would also soon join the fight after a year-long combat tour in Iraq. Brigade members watched Katrina attack their home state from a battlefield half a world away.
All those soldiers that lived in New Orleans were watching it on TV, and they said, well, that's my house. Well, it's the roof of my house.
Retired Major General John Basilica commanded the 256th. His 4,000 soldiers arrived home about 4 weeks after Katrina hit, battle-tested and ready for a more personal mission. The general said there were no parades or welcome home celebrations, but this is where his troops wanted to be.
To be able to clear the route so that you could get medical supplies in there and food and water and things to be able to assist people, we were doing that. We were doing medical, we were distributing commodities, we were setting up camps, we were putting everything that you could think of to be able to support the people, to be home and to not have to deal with insurgents and bombs, and it was still a heck of a lot better than being in Iraq.
Both Basilica and Thibodeau are proud of how the Guard responded when their state needed them the most.
This is a great example of how the National Guard can perform its federal and its state mission, protecting what matters, their country and their state and their local communities.
When I look back and I think back at that, and I think about how quickly we were able to get the people that were there that had no food or water for 4 or 5 days, we were able to give them food and water and give them a lifeline and get them out of there. I take a lot of satisfaction in it.
Back in the lower Ninth Ward, some parts of the neighborhood remain frozen in time. Empty, overgrown lots still dot the landscape 20 years later. But Robert Green sees hope in what he called gradual, not slow redevelopment here. He keeps the back stairs, the only part of his family home that survived the storm, not as a monument to loss, but as a symbol of what's still possible.
It's representative of life. It's representative of what life used to be like, but what life can come to being back to.
Paul Murphy, WWL, Louisiana.
Before Katrina made landfall in New Orleans, a team of about 14 people at the zoo worked to evacuate animals to prepare for what was to come. One of those people, a zoo director, says the hurricane taught him the importance of having a disaster plan and getting ahead of the storm.
You know, I'm so proud of the team that remained behind because they accomplished an awful lot. Living at the zoo for a couple of months was interesting. We were hunkered down in the reptile house, and the reptile house was built in part with a hurricane in mind. All the facilities had a challenge during the storm, especially the aquarium that lost so many fish with their power going down. The generators were failing. But we did go back for the 10th anniversary of Katrina. We were invited back to that, and it was an emotional experience, as is the case when I think back on it now.
Along with the animals and people rescued from homes and floodwaters, babies in the neonatal intensive care unit at a local hospital in New Orleans were rescued as well. One of those babies, who is now an adult, reunites with one of the doctors that saved his life. And they do it every year for his birthday. Meg Ferris from our sister station WWL has that heartwarming story.
Happy birthday to you. It's Christian Stewart's 20th birthday. His mother, Daniela Stewart, believes divine intervention is the reason this day could ever happen. It was July 2005. 19-year-old Daniela was working 2 jobs and glowing with joy over expecting her first baby in November.
I had serious pain, but it just felt like cramping pains. I didn't even know that, I was going into labor and dilating. The people that checked on me, it was like, oh my God, Ms. Stewart, you're 9 centimeters dilated. You're about to have a baby. And I was in shock.
At only 26 weeks, Christian was born. He weighed 1 pound, 12 ounces.
And I just see a little tiny baby that's in the incubator because they had to, put oxygen and tube down his throat. I was just praying to God. I was like, I hope I don't lose my son.
Heart surgery soon followed on a boy you could hold in the palm of one hand.
Every day, morning and nighttime, even after I got off from work, I would literally walk from Britannia Street all the way to Napoleon, close by Claiborne, and go see my son at nighttime. It didn't matter if it was 11, 12 o'clock, the people would let me see him and I walked back home.
But the emotional agony this new mom felt was about to reach epic proportions.
You're looking at the breach itself. 400 feet of wall is missing.
Hurricane Katrina hit. New Orleans was devastated. Christian was in the NICU at Memorial Medical Center. Daniela was in New Orleans East.
The water just came through the house like a river, and I'm so short, and I'm like saying in my mind, God, am I gonna make it? I just had a kid.
The water was quickly rising at Memorial too. Christian was in an incubator there, his tiny lungs and very life depending on a mechanical ventilator for each and every breath. That ventilator only able to sustain life by power from backup generators. And the floodwaters were about to drown them out too.
He was extremely sick at that time, when Katrina came and already got a significant chronic lung disease.
A few days into the aftermath misery, in the scalding temperatures and with little sleep, neonatologist Dr. Juan Gershanik and the medical team physically moved incubators up several floors and over to another building with a heliport on the roof.
We were told the helicopters were going to be there at around noon, and they still didn't show up. And I said, our babies are running out of, the machinery, and that will be the end of the ability to maintain them alive.
Dr. Gershanik then pleaded with a helicopter pilot dropping off supplies to take him and Christian to Women's Hospital in Baton Rouge.
And I said, sir, we need to go. These babies are very critical and they cannot wait any longer. He said, your incubator weighs 250 pounds. This won't go out more than a year or two and will fall down again.
So Dr. Gershanik took Christian out of the incubator. He put his tiny, frail body against his own skin to transfer his body heat. He loaded 2 oxygen tanks on the supply helicopter and hand-pumped the oxygen into Christian, never missing one breath, pinching him constantly to make sure he was alive. And then a little later, another scary moment. They needed to land and refuel.
I told the pilot after 10-15 minutes, sir, what's going on. This baby need to get to Baton Rouge as soon as possible. And he showed me another 2 helicopters being refueled and say to me, Doc, these other helicopters are also trying to save lives and they were here first.
That turned out to be a blessing. You see, that first oxygen tank was nearly empty. So while on the ground, the pilot helped the doctor connect to the second one. That would have been impossible on a loud, bumpy flight. After 2 hours, they made it to Women's Hospital in Baton Rouge. And after spending his first 4.5 months in a NICU, Christian went home weighing 6 whole pounds with ambitions greater than his cognitive delays.
No, Mr. Great, bienvenido.
Now, every single year, Daniela, who now lives in Houston with her 3 children, travels back to New Orleans to spend Christian's birthday with the Krishanics.
World War II museum right there.
My kids love him, I love him, and we're always forever grateful for him, and we'll always look at him like family. If it wasn't for him, especially, God giving him the ability to be able to help my son would not be here today.
Well, I think he's a good person. He helped me out through the years and made me a better person.
You can have relatives by blood relatives, and you got the other kind of relative called relatives for love.
While it was a personal health storm, along with a community-wide destructive one that brought these two families together, every cloud, yes, even the raging ones from Katrina, has a silver lining.
Happy birthday to you.
Meg Farris, WWL, Louisiana.
And we'll be back with Hurricane Hub Live Trivia right after this. Welcome back. Last night I posed the question that by August 31st, what percentage of New Orleans was flooded? Of course, it wasn't immediately known that the levees had broken, and it was even a little bit later that they started to successively start to fail around the city, and it ended up that 80% of the city of New Orleans was flooded. The French Quarter, a little bit higher, didn't have as many issues because, again, it was a little bit above sea level. I'm meteorologist Evan Stewart. I want to thank you for joining us here on Hurricane Hub Live. We do it every weeknight at 8 o'clock, and I especially want to thank you for joining us tonight and really this week as we've been taking a look back at some of the heartache that came with Hurricane Katrina, but some of the stories of hope that came out of the Gulf as well. Again, we do this every day at 8 o'clock. Hunter Forrest will be in here tomorrow night and on Sunday, and I'll be back here on Labor Day Monday. So again, make sure you join us for Hurricane Hub Live every night at 8 p.m.